Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys making the time to be here. We're going to get back uh, into this book we've been reading last couple of months. Very interesting book. We pull out a lot of good stuff. You know, we dodge the hijacks when we hear them, but we pull out a lot of good stuff that pertains to our previous research about the true old world being in America and things like that, and just so-called old world influence over here or whatever. You know, when we're talking about prehistory, the Americas, right? The real oldest land, motherland, you know, birth of civilization, things like that. And this book again is called America, the Background of Columbus, being a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus, by Jennings C. Wise, from the Virginia Academy of Science, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Okay, this is from about 1945. And I just want to remind everybody that I do have the playlist already created for the previous readings and reviews of this book. The playlist is the same name of the book, America Being a Survey, you know, of the Revelations of Science, you know, the name of the book. And you'll find the last or the previous four reviews or readings of this book, which again has been a lot of good information here, all right, to dig through. So if you're interested, if you've missed those, you got the playlist right here. All right, so let's go back to the book. So we go to page 97 of this book. We go to chapter 5 now. And it's called America in the Philosophic Ark of Noah. It says here, when Plato made Soches, the southern Christos of the serpent cult, tell Solon that the Hellenes, thanks to Athene, the goddess of wisdom and war, were the noblest race ever to appear on the earth, he merely ascribed to them the character of nobility imputed to these original knights of the Round Table. The original knights of the Round Table are the Christos of the serpent cult. They just talk about ancient Americans here, remember that. And they're saying nobles, right? They're going to mention Aryans. Remember, Aryan means noble, the noblest, huh? Constituting the earth recently ascribed to the Aryans. Noble, noblest, that's what it means. Since the purpose of these champions of the spiritual realm, known to their Norse kinsmen, relations with the kings or Norsemen, Danites, Vikings, kingsmen in the realm of hell as Valhalla, was to dispel the moral darkness of the earth with the light represented by the Norse god Baldur. Appropriately in the quiver of Athene appeared the arrows representing the shafts of light making up her wisdom. Part of her wisdom consisted, however, in the recognition of the fact there can be no neutrality between moral right and moral wrong, however profitable it may be momentarily, without a certain penalty. So the goddess of wisdom was also the goddess of war. In short, the nobility of the original Aryan Hellenes, Hellenized people, consisted of the sacrifice, symbolized by Baldur and the Valkyr, of all material considerations. This indeed was the idealism symbolized by the Avars and the helms of the Aryan gods. In it, post-Diluvian Egypt, post-Diluvian after the flood, was to share it while through Neith, the unbegotten self-perpetuating mother of Aryan philosophy. Nevertheless, despite the efforts of Noah, as time went on, the Atlanteans, so-called Atlanteans, ancient Americans who were determined to save themselves in Libya, figuratively having killed Baldur, went from bad to worse as one ally after another fell away from the Hellenes. The story is clearly told in Genesis 6. They're telling you it's the same story from Genesis 6. It says, or 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and after this, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The giants, huh? Here, of course, in the resume of racial evolution embodied in Genesis 6, Dealing with the cycle of the sixth avatar in the aspect of Balasharama, we find the clearest possible reference to the gigantic fourth root race from whom the Aryans of the Noah camp cycle were descended. Aryans, from the Titans or these giants, like the giant skeletons and people they have found buried all through North America and all over the Americas. Is that who you're talking about? This is what I'm saying, guys. Put two and two together, trust me. They're calling it in their Philosophic, the fourth root race. That's what they're calling it in their mythology created by Blavatsky. So let's not get too lost, right? Pull out the baby, starts the hijacks. It says, therefore, Plato and Josephus merely reiterated what is said in Genesis 6:5 with respect to the present fifth race in the sixth cycle. And it says in number 5 verse, it says, and God saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. In Genesis 6:6, it says, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. In the last paragraph, the reference is only to the material man described as the man in the earth, and not the whole human race. That's deep right there. In other words, it was the type of man no longer fitted by nature to survive because of his carnality. Thus, in the 7th paragraph, in accord with the septenary wisdom, philosophy, the end of this human cycle is described. It's just an end of a cycle, Genesis 6:7 says, and the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping things, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Because Noah in the aspect of the Greco-Assyrian Ea is the same as Ea, right? They're telling you Noah is the same as Ea. The Chaldean Javeh, that's Noah too, Javeh, The Brahmin Atma and the Adam Katman of the Kabbalah represented the soul of inspirited man. We read in Genesis 6:8, I guess, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So we see there is no contradiction whatever in the apparent anomaly of Noah, his sons and their wives being saved in the ark despite the alleged purpose of the Lord to destroy the man he had created. Now remember something about Noah that we learned in the book of Enoch, right? The ones that were removed from the original Bibles, apocryphal or apocryphy books now. He said Noah was like, remember his dad was saying how he was almost born like an albino, like he looked like more like the angels than man. Noah, remember that. It says in vain, Josephus pointed out that Noah undertook to reform the idolatry of those who had re-enthroned the moon god Sin, Thoth, who were emulating the giants of old, Thoth, the hijack, who was doing that? Talking about Enoch, Even those claiming to be angels, the fallen, were consorting with women, implying that the black magicians were in control again. Archaeological research has shown that all over the earth there are rude stone monuments, including the thaumaturgical type ever ascribed to black magicians, called balance rolling and speaking stones. They are particularly numerous in Britain, like the one to be seen at the mystical pool of Helgoat in Armorica, and the idols in Palestine called Bethels, houses of God. Ignoring the fact these idols would have been preserved for ages in the eyes of the Pleistocene, the legitimate archaeologists poo-poo the conclusions of Cambry and many others that they were of antediluvian origin. Yet the Dawn men, whose tools and weapons have been found in East Anglia, did not fashion these instruments for no reason, and eventually perhaps the thaumaturgic monuments will be carried back to the age of Tuamati, the Egyptian patron of magic. Tuamati. Meantime, it is interesting to contemplate the possibility that while the trinal man of Java was striving to pacify the traditional wild man of Borneo, whose descendants today inhabit Australia, Malaysia, Singala, and India, Some of the Pliocene weapons found in East Anglia may have been employed by the original Americans. Look at this: the weapons in the British Isles, guys, and some parts of Europe. We already have read this in many other archaeological researches, right? That a lot of the stones and monuments and mounds and burials and the way uh, people are burying their dead and all that closely match the ancient people of America. Just as it says here, that a lot of the weapons from the Pliocene found in the British Isles, East Anglia, may have been employed by the original Americans, including the Algonquin, the Algonquin, and the Muskogee, and the Dakota, as well as the Scottish and the original British. All right, listen, it's all connected. All these people were trading, mixing, going together, might be related in some way, in defending themselves against the Mashimu invaders of hell from Meropia. Uh-oh, they were allied against these other people, the Mashimu of hell. Meropia, huh? Huh. Genesis, of course, does not pretend to deal with all the peoples of the earth. Inherently, it is the cosmology of the Hebrews of Asia Minor. The Hebrews of Asia Minor. As the signs of the impending earth destruction that was to convert the Pliocene into the Pleistocene form of the earth became ever more clear. In order to save the seeds for a future and better race, the Aryan Kabirs, Kabira, Kivara, Culebra, Cobra, Kabirs, Aryan serpents, whose mysteries had been enthroned for ages, Aryan Nagas. In Palestine, organized among the red, black, and Mongoloid peoples of three Aryan brotherhoods represented by Shem, Ham, and Japhet, respectively. Again, we dodged the hijack with their classifications of people, the races, a hijack from the 1800s. And it says here in Genesis, supposedly Genesis 6:13, and God said unto Noah, and the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Inasmuch as the impeding earth's destruction would throw the survivors back into savagery, just as the Miocene cataclysm of which the Adamites had given warning had done, it was imperative that the wisdom handed down through the Aryans be preserved by the three brotherhoods for their respective peoples represented by their wives. Accordingly, in Genesis 6 we read, make thee an ark of gopher wood. So Genesis 6:14, right? So make thee an ark. Listen, this is an important part right here. This will tell you America's a true old world. So make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shall thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. So what is the Most High telling Noah to build the ark with? He's telling him to use gopher wood, all right? Again, gopher wood only grows in the Americas. All right, so we're going to the basics and the facts, all right? We got the Torreya Florida, or the Florida Torreya, or Torreya taxifolia, also known as gopher wood, okay? So it's also called Florida nutmeg or gopher wood. Is an endangered subcanopy tree of the Jew family Texacae. It is native to only a small glacial refugium in the southeastern United States at the state border region of northern Florida and southwestern Georgia. We're talking about gopher wood is indigenous, is native to the Americas, this part of the Americas, Florida and Georgia, the southeastern United States, okay? In 1821, colonial control of Spanish Florida shifted from Spain to the United States through the Adams Owners Treaty. American settlers, including plantation owners and their slaves, began to move into the Florida territory, exacerbating the ongoing conflict with the refugee Red Stick Creeks and their allies from the Creek War and the immigrant population of Seminoles and Maroons. One such plantation owner was the patriarch of the Kroom family, who in 1826 purchased land around the town of Tallahassee. Okay, so that's a little history right there, just in case. But again, gopher wood is from America, right? Again, we got information about gopher wood. This is the regions you can find trees of North America, gopher wood in the world, not just in the Americas, guys. In the world, the Torrellana taxifolia, commonly known as the Florida torreya or gopher wood, polecat wood, savin, as well as stinking cedar. The currently accepted scientific name of Florida torreya is Torreya taxifolia. Florida torreya is endemic to 3 countries in northern Florida: Liberty, Gadsden, and Jackson. Endemic, meaning native. And this is endemic to this part of the world. Okay? The natural range of this species extends along the limestone bluffs of the eastern bank of the Apalachicola River and its tributaries for 40 miles. Okay? That's where it's found in the world. There's a small colony of 60 trees approximately 6 miles west of the river at a site known as Dog Pond in Jackson County. There's literally a colony of these gopher woods still there. Okay, you guys understand? Did Noah's Ark set sail from Florida, exploring the mystery of gopher wood and ancient origins? Okay. Gopher wood. Again, the book was telling us the verse Genesis 6:14, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark. All right. Gopher wood grows in the Americas only. You guys get it? America's a true old world. Let's go back to the book. So again, the book's telling us about that Bible verse, the gopher wood, right? That's what the ark was made out of. So obviously made it from materials from the Americas, right? And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. Genesis 6:16, a window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. The Most High giving him specific directions on how to make this huge ark or ship, whatever form, whether it flies or whether he's talking about in the water. An intelligent person is only amused by Dory's picture of a ship 550 feet long, with a beam of 80 feet, wallowing in a turbulent sea, showing the elephants, lions, tigers, giraffes, and gnats peeking out of the window, with Noah, his sons, and their wives. The whole idea that the ark was a vessel in the sense of maritime craft may be traced to Nicolaus of Damascus, who in esoteric terms described the lesser philosophical vehicle of Arhat as a ship, in order to conceal the implication of the ark as the esoteric ark navis, through which enlightenment was transmitted from one race to another. The wisdom of teaching Christian children, which soon becomes manifest to them as an absurdity with a consequent lack of faith in Holy Scripture, is not for the author to judge. The thoughtful need only read the paragraphs of Genesis 6 following the specifications for the ark to see that in one aspect it implied the form of the earth, whereupon not only the sons of Noah and their wives, but the other peoples of the earth, and all the animals were to find a refuge from the common deluge, as well as the food and water necessary for their existence during the bitter ordeal of the great freeze at the end of the Pliocene, which converted the once verdant region of the Arctic zone into the ice cap constituting the realm of the frost god Boreas. Thus, the length of the ark, 300 cubits, corresponds exactly to the earth mass extending westward from the peak of Arman, 150 degrees east, in the Marathi of Kamashatka, the Kara Maya ghost, all right? Kara, black, Maya, ghost, the cross of the Kara. Wow. To Mount Elias, as now called McKinley, 60 degrees north, 150 degrees west, in Alaska. The god of the ghost. The width of 50 degrees indicated the breadth of the terrestrial domain in which the Aryans were to find a refuge from the flood, the Aryans or the nobles, as well as escape from the perverted peoples of the equatorial zone, extending from 80 degrees north to 30 degrees north. Therefore, the ark was to be 30 cubits high. The window implied the heavens, and the door at the side the entrance from the north for those who with the animals would come to Noah when the ice cap formed. The three rooms implied the three climatic zones, and the three stories, the three areas that were to be occupied by the three races then on the earth who gave their names to the red, black, and yellow seas. The cubit with which the ark in the sense of the terrestrial ark was to be finished off above the third story was the North Pole. But although the ark in the terrestrial sense represented the Pleistocene form of the earth that came into being concurrently with the Great Ice Age, it also possessed a monumental aspect for which the specifications given in Genesis provided the fashion, in parentheses, implying the symbolic form in which the history already embodied in the zodiac of the serpent code. Again, they're calling it the serpent code, that's the hijack. The serpent Khans, King Dynasty, the Nagas, was to be preserved by the three Aryan brotherhoods of Asia Minor. Thus, in language as plain as dared use, Josephus stated that before the deluge, the unperverted descendants of Seth, who had invented that peculiar sort of wisdom, see whose it is, which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, lest their inventions be lost before they were sufficiently known upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water, proceeded to erect two pillars. Of these the first was of brick, the other of stone. To this he added, they inscribed their discoveries on them both, that in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone might remain, they exhibit those discoveries to mankind and also inform them there was no or another pillar of brick erected by them. To this he adds, now this remains in the land of Syria to this day. Scoffing at these words as mere piffle, Western historians have continued despite all that appears from the graph of Gia. Their efforts to crowd the entire history of civilization into the cycle, which has succeeded the magnetic cataclysms of about 10,000 BC. But when the Brahmins told how the dwarf avatar Varuna stepped off the heavens and the earth in three strides, when Hesiod in the Theogony and Plato pointed out how the earth was divided between the gods, when the Greek adepts portrayed Atlas bearing the celestial spear with his upraised arms and the terrestrial spear on his shoulder, when Diodorus Siculus declared Atlas was the eponym applied by the Greeks to the Atlantean astronomers. Okay? Deep right there. Atlas, when we talk about all these so-called Greek gods portraying to real people or real geographical places in the Americas. And when Josephus stated that the sons of Seth invented that peculiar wisdom that concerns itself with the celestial bodies and their order, they did not lie. So when they say the sons of Seth, in case you don't know biblical genealogy, those are the descendants of Noah, Enoch, Jared, that was the son that was born after Adam. Abel had been murdered by Cain and Cain banished. They had another one that was Seth. They continued the line, just in case you guys don't know. So it says the words pillar and brick were used by Josephus in an esoteric sense. In short, he used the word brick in the sense of the geometrical square, which the first physical bricks possessed. Pity, it is the grand symbolism of the grid constituting the geodetic system of Noah's Ark, included in every physical geography, is not explained to children. One need only glance at it to see it consists of 360 triangles in the northern and an equal number in the southern hemisphere, each with a base of 1 degree, all subdivided by circles of latitude into bricks or squares 1 degree by 1 degree, except at the poles where the triangles necessarily appear. Before one may understand how Varuna, the avatar of the present race, came to design the philosophic ark of Noah, one of the basic conceptions of Varuna must be fixed in mind. The science of symbology holds that the oldest symbol of man so far discovered is the swastika. So this is what they call it today. Remember that it's an ancient symbol and is found, all over the Americas too. So we're gonna highlight that for sure. It is also ascribed to a people of the same name in Tibet called Jans, meaning the first, whose name appears in John Mayen or Mayan, the Olympian realm of Janina, and the Janiculum in Rome, upon which Janus was enthroned. Corresponding to the esoteric theory of evolution, this symbol possessed the 7 forms here shown. It says 1 point of matter in space, first root race. Again, this is the Philosophic thing, the Blavatsky thing. All right, but you guys can take a look at it too. Plane of matter on the earth. The IO, the first, the spiritual man descended into matter. Prometheus, all, relating to the Americas, ancient Americas. And the swastika, the undiscussed old world form representing the apparent revolution of the sun as seen by the original peoples on earth in the Arctic zone, so claimed by the Nazis, so claimed. So they quote him the Nazi. Come on, guys. This is more ancient than that. That's the cross, man. Look at that. That's the X, different, the undiscussed form, the 4 winds. X marks the spot, the 4 corners. Look at that. Let's see, the undiscussed form represented the revolution of the sun as seen by the peoples of the subequatorial zone. It is known as the American form because found among the peoples of Peru and the Ayamaria of Titicaca. All right, that's their symbol. While the esoteric doctrine of human evolution was expressed in these philosophic symbols, the Hindu Matemati, the man-god Atma, hymn of the cross, to which traces the present decimal system introduced to Europe by the Arabs, was based on the philosophic conception of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0, making up the decade, 10. The ancient system of mathematics was said to be of the hexagonic order, so called because the circle was supposed to have resulted from the expansion of the sacred lotus and its earthly reflection. Thus, if a triangle be superimposed on a, backwards, it says triangle, a hexagon appears at the center at the resulting figure. Thus, you get the symbol of the, the star, the hexagon, known as the Seal of Solomon. Well, that's what they made it, right? The Star of Rephaim. This symbol, constituting the 6-pointed star surrounded by a serpent, had been employed by the ancients for ages as the symbol of the serpent code. That's the hijack a little bit. Therefore, when Pythagoras defined the circle as a polygon with an infinite number of sides, he only stated that was already known, or what was already known. He merely pointed out to the uninitiated the fact that the hexagon approached the circle more nearly than the triangles from which it is derived. The idea of this conception originated in relatively recent times and is unattainable. Today we know that the Gauls are the descendants of the Atlanteans. Like I be trying to tell y'all, man. But they say that a lot of these Gauls and Picts and ancient people of the British Isles and of parts of Europe and Iberian Peninsula and things, they came from the Atlanteans or are the Atlanteans. So this is what I've been trying to tell you, you see? So who's the Atlanteans? Who these people that ended up in these parts of the world? Remember, the oldest land, the oldest people. And if anybody was to cross the Atlantic first, we got the drop from the most famous researcher on navigation, of the history of navigation. He said it would have to been from the Americas to cross the Atlantic first and go into Europe or Africa. So here is another example of that. As they're saying today, we know that the Gauls are the descendants of the Atlanteans who occupied the realm of Gadis or Gadarius, the tribe of Gad, the twin brother of Atlas, which included Ireland and Cadiz, also part of Ireland, right? The serpent realm, where the Hamitic language appeared in the Canaries. Therefore, the implications of the dolmens of Portugal, the port of the god or Gadis or Gauls, the port of Gauls, Gadis, and those of Ireland marking the same meridians are readily understood. In short, these circular subterranean monuments were but symbols of the evolution of the earth and man. Thus, the circular subterranean dolmens of Portugal disclose an interior spiral structure ascending to the upper shore of the dome, corresponding to the Numa, or oldest fossils of the Nummulitic age, in which a similar structure appears. These very ancient monuments themselves constituted swastikas. The vast antiquity of astronomical knowledge is therefore obvious. Volney pointed out that the zodiac must have been known to the peoples of Asia Minor not less than 15,000 years before the time of Hipparchus, who was supposed to have discovered how to divide its circle into six parts and was long credited by Western scholars with inventing the zodiac. Soon Maki demonstrated that the Dendera zodiac of the Egyptians was probably employed by them 78,000 years ago, if not long before. Now, I just want to add here, right? You guys already know when we're talking about ancient Egypt, we're talking about the Americas. We're talking about the oldest, calendars. When we're talking about the Olmec and the Mayan calendars, we very old guys. Okay, so let's see if they bring it up here, but just in case they don't. So continuing says, today we are told the oldest cigarette among the many towers of Babel in Mesopotamia is the library temple at Nippur, 32 degrees north, 45 degrees east, marking the meridian of Circassia and the latitude of Man-na Sorowar. For ages it was buried in the mud of Mesopotamia. Constructed of burned bricks or bitumen, it forms a 300 cube and therefore contains a true cross, which with a vertical arm 1200 and a horizontal arm 900. It is therefore, in fact, a book of numbers, and stone embodying the mystery of the tree code upon which the Sephiroth was based. This grand monument stands on the meridian of Piran in the Pamir and exactly 50 degrees east and 18 degrees south of the Piran Round on Land's End, in ancient Cornwall, once a part of Armorica. It was a part of Armorica, Cornwall, whence we have seen the mysteries of Ru were conveyed to Piranu in the Pimiru and to Rutenu in the Palestine. All right, remember that Ru, the continent, was the North American continent when Americas was connected to the British Isles and all that. It is useless, therefore, to imagine the principles of mathematics were not understood by the ancients who designed the zodiac. Already we have noted the rectangle 24 by 74 on the summit of Adams Peak. The ratio of the sides is, you guys see the number 3.08333 plus. Today, the ratio of the equator to the polar axis is 24,889.78 divided by 7,899. All right, equals, man, that's some high math right there, right? It may be therefore that the difference was caused by a change of obliquity in the oblate spheroid, caused by a change in the size and weight of the ice caps. The axis of the foot at the center of the rectangle give the ratio in inches of 2.133 plus. This is just a tenth of the cubit, 21 inches plus. On the other hand, 64 says inches or 30 inches divided by 12 gives 7 to 8 feet, or 7.8 or 7 by 10, right? In which both the septenary and the decimal symbols appear. Finally, the short axis is at the ball of the foot so that the two axes form a perfect true cross. This, of course, could not be plagiarism by the Hindus, since the platform on Peak da Ruta Sagala is the work of Ru. Accordingly, on bones and stones on the Paleolithic age found in Switzerland, not only the swastika but the sacred Hebdat were etched. If we should erect on the base of an equilateral triangle a solid figure, so like a triangle, right, with the other three sides corresponding to the base, we would have a tetrahedron. In the same way, the hexagon would yield a dodecahedron, which would approach a sphere more clearly than the tetrahedron, inasmuch as the ancients conceived that all matter, including the terrestrial sphere, evolves from the so-called universal dodecahedron. They based the geodetic grid on that principle. Accordingly, if two hexahedrons be placed with their bases together, the common base will intercept the equator of the globe at the 6 points here shown. All right, so, this is getting deep, For people who like this, right? It says 30 degrees east, the Ru Wensori. Here, six mountains surrounding seventh, forming a natural that circle. This meridian is marked by the labyrinth of Fayumu and the Moseian Olympus. So it's 90 degrees east, now open sea within the area of the Indian Ocean where Lanka once existed. Underground land here sunken. This meridian is marked by the Dhaka near Calcutta, Punaka, the capital of Bhutan, Lhasa, the pass of Urumqi, and Bogdo Ula in Xinjiang, Pola, at the head of Siberia, and Severn Novaya, Seembla. And then you got 150 degrees east, you got Panape, Paranagape, Paranaga, the philosophy home of the Naga. Here is a very ancient mound with a labyrinth below surmounted by a megalithic temple given in its walls the altitude of Lhasa, 30 degrees north, and in its rectangular measures a map. It marks the meridian of the peak of Armen. 150 degrees west has now open sea near Christmas Island, a relic of Daiitia. This is the meridian of Mount McKinley, which is 60 degrees north, and Otaheite, 27 degrees south. And then it says 90 degrees west, the Tower Island in the Galapagos group. This meridian is marked by the Teocalli at Copan in Guatemala, Uxmala and Siaki and Yucatan, by mounds in the delta of the Mississippi, at Memphis in Tanasa, at Cahokia in Illinois and Wisconsin, right? Look at that. It says 300 degrees west, open sea near Rochedo, Sao Paulo, where the connecting link of Africa and Brazil once lay. This meridian, once marked by Mount Atlas, is now marked by the Cape Verde Islands. The Cape Verde Islands, man. Corvo Islands in the Azores. Corvo equals blackbird, and by the highest point of Greenland. Wow, that's what used to connect the lands. The measure of the equator was readily calculated by use of the following formula, all right? So this is the formula they use, all right? You guys see that, right? It says once the circumference of the Earth had been calculated, the arc to be measured was the only unknown factor and could be calculated by the formula with artificial wells and heliographs by expanding the dodecahedron into a polyhedron with 720 faces, half above and half below the equator, and dividing the grid into small spherical squares of 1 degree each by 718 circles parallel to the equator. It was possible to chart the whole surface of the Earth by mnemonic projection in reference to some shrine. But the atoms of Gia did more than this. They knew that the ecliptic of the sun reaches solstices at the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Also, they were familiar with climate. Therefore, to each of the Arctic zones, they assigned a depth from the pole equal to have the equatorial zone included between the two tropics. Thus, there were 5 zones which, when viewed from either pole, present a symbolic figure, right? At the circle within a circle, and a circle set in a dot, corresponding exactly to the principle of the universal dodecahedron on which the grid was based. Having identified the geodetic grid of the pillar of the brick to which Josephus referred, and seeing how the ancients at a later day enshrined the mystery of the tree code in the actual pillar of brick at Nippur, let us now discover the pillar of stone which he referred, showing that Egypt, of all the lands on the earth, has suffered no inundation and no upheaval since life appeared on earth. Geology fully explains the name sacred and imperishable land, all right? Talking about ancient Egypt, talking about the Americas, applied by the Hermeticists, Hermetics, off to this region prior to the biblical deluge of 850,000 BC. Long time ago. They're saying Arabia was attached to Bessarabia, Egypt to Syria, and Armenia to the present Surf. But then there was no Red, Caspian, and Black Seas. Therefore, together, Egypt, Arabia, and Asia Minor constituted Syriat. The nomes of Egypt bear an mystic name similar to those of the Celtic and native clans of America. just like the Celtic and native clans of America. We're talking about ancient Egypt and all these ancient places. What we're really talking about an ancient geography, constituted in the geographic arrangements a zodiac, just like the Americas. Each name, nome, sign, or clan had its own secret society constituting the lower degrees of the mysteries. Still, when the Great Pyramid of Giza was erected by the pharaoh Shifu, that's the hijack of the first dynasty, the surrounding plain, just as in the case of the Temple of Sais, formed a zodiac, at the center of which the pyramid was reared as a sundial. Exactly 300 feet east of its base stands the Sphinx, hewn out of the native rock, constituting a pillar of stone no flood could wash away, all right? So, what's the background within the Sphinx and what does it have to do with Queen Mu? Remember that video, right? Queen Mu, so Isis, right? Queen Mu and the Jaguar. What was it really before? All right? It's just a theme park over there. Reams have been written about this wondrous monument, of which the head was sculptured with great care, deemed by Maspero the likeness of Horus, that's the hijack, the earth's son, begotten by Osiris, representing the solar code of the west, out of his sister Isis, representing the lunar code of the east. Also, Isis, all right, related to this so-called things, like I was saying, Queen Mu. And you know how the head is just an addition. See, they're saying that's ancient. That's why I said you got that's the hijack with some of this stuff in the book. If they're going with that, right? Because that head is different than the rest of the body. It's added on. It must have been something else before. So it says she's representing the lunar code of the east, and truth it was the Aryan symbol of the serpent bird, symbolizing the light bearer called Horus, Secha, Set, Typhoon, Javeh, Atma, Adam, Katmon, Cadmus, Prometheus, and Lucifer. Cadmus, huh? Possessing the tail of a serpent corresponding to the fish and the amphibian, or the avatars of the first and second root races, the body of an ox corresponding to the boar, the legs of the lion, and the head of a cowlet kabir. It stands at 30 degrees north, 31 degrees east. All right, they add that up, equals 7 near Cairo at the site called Babylon, Gate of the Gods by the Aryan Greeks. There it looks past Mount Hor and Mount Nisa, where Sin, Zeus, Dionysius, Osiris, Horus, and all the hijacks, huh? and all the other solar deities of the Mediterranean world were said to have been born. Not to the abyss of learning, but to Lhasa, God's house. All right. So again, all mythology, no origin. Remember. So right now we're talking about math. So that symbolizes it's all symbolic, even the place names in modern times. A strip 50 cubits wide and 300 cubits long, folded into a cube with sides 50 times 50 cubits, when unfolded, gives a true cross. 200 cubits or 350 as that feet high, but the measures 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide merely gave the fashion or design of the ark. The overall length of the Sphinx is 172.5 feet, corresponding exactly to the tallest of the five colossi at Bamiyan and Jalabat, symbolizing the five root races and their relative sizes. From the base of the paws to the pineal gland, the height of the Sphinx is 60 feet, given the distance to the Arctic zone, 60 degrees plus 30 degrees equal 90 degrees. The head measures 30 feet by 14 feet. Thus, the axis forms a true cross corresponding to the Ankh shown by the pictographs in the hand of Pita. In the temple is an inscription naming the figure as that of Haramachis. When further analyzed with respect to the earth as it was in the Pliocene, it appears that it marks the antipodal meridian of the region of Otaheite, of which Tahiti is a relic. Finally, the length of the legs is 50 feet, given the exact distance in degrees to Lhasa, 30 degrees north, 91 degrees east, that it embodies a map of the world. Now we know that for ages the Sphinx had been buried in the sands of the Libyan desert, when at last it was uncovered, and the temple beneath restored by the Menkaure, the successor of Chefu. Still, it was covered with an impervious red pitch, a stone preservative, similar to that on the colossi for Bamiyan. A little still remained until recent times. Therefore, the ordinary test of time applied to the wear and tear of stone from climatic causes are eliminated in the case of the Sphinx by two factors: preservative from the heat and moisture, an interment probably from 850,000 BC until about 2500 BC. To repeat, the legs of the Sphinx point exactly to the sacrosanct and once forbidden area of Lhasa, where dwelled the swastika or Jans, right, or America, from which the oldest known symbol has been traced around the earth to every clime. Here on a plateau about 11,000 feet above sea level stands today the city of Potalo, marking the antipodes of Patala, hell, and to the west, at 29 degrees 49 north, 90 degrees 55 east, is located the city of Lhasa, God's house. Covering about 70 square miles, it marks exactly the latitude of Memphis in Egypt. Huh. What Memphis, huh? The real one? To the west of Lhasa is Shingatse, the seat of the Panchalama, and nearby the monastic city of Tachilumpo. The inner city of Lhasa, where dwells the Dalai Lama, clusters upon the pyramidal height called the Potalo. Among the other structures is an ancient circular serpent temple rising to a point and forming and it's blank there, says, it is to be noted that here the point 30 the inches north, 90 degrees east lies within the areas which include Lhasa, Shigatse, and Tashi Lumpopo. Thus, it marks the intersection of a geodetic tau, or true cross, corresponding to the name Tibet. Of this figure, the latitudinal arm, 30 degrees north, passes through the deltas of the Euphrates, 47 degrees east, where it is marked by a great complexity of mounds. The sunken red city of Petra, 35 degrees east, the Sphinx, 31 degrees east, the Great Labyrinth, 30 degrees east, and the delta of the Mississippi, 90 degrees west. The delta of the Yangtze Kiang, 120 degrees east, and the great complex of triangular mounds near Chongqing. On the other hand, the meridian constituting the vertical member passes through the delta of the Ganges and Brahmaputra, 22 degrees north, Punakha, 28 degrees north, and the capital of Bhutan, the pass of Urumqi, 42 degrees north, leading through the Tianqian or Celestial Mountains from Xinjiang into Siberia in the antipodes, and it is even more clearly marked. Thus, the meridian of 90 degrees west passes from the highest point of North America and Grant Land near the North Pole through the Hudson Bay and Lake Superior, Wisconsin at the exact antipodes of Xinjiang, where it is marked by a great complex of effigy mounds, Cahokia, 38 degrees north, near St. Louis, where stands an immense triple truncate surrounded by 45 pyramids. Memphis, all right, listen, the real Memphis, 35 degrees north, and the delta of the Mississippi, 30 degrees north, both marked by pyramids. All right, pyramids over here. Merida and Uxmal, in Mexico, 19 degrees north in Yucatan, marked by numerous teocalis or pyramids or houses of God. That's what they call the pyramids. Copan, 16 degrees north in Guatemala, marked by another huge teocalli or huge pyramid, and Tower Island on the equator in the Galapagos group. Manifestly designed to symbolize Atma, the first, the soul of the earth, to this geodetic figure traces the place names Trujillo or Trujillo, the true cross realm in Spain. Veracruz and Anahuac, right, in Mexico, Veracruz means the true cross, remember? Trujillo in Guatemala, Trujillo in Peru Ruta, and the Temple of the Cross eventually erected in Palenque, Father, Son, and the Queen. Surely enough has been said to show the ancients who placed the foot on Adam's Peak were familiar with America. Although in the Southeast Asia, they're saying they're related. They are part of ancient America. Today, we know that the first builders to appear in Egypt were the Chesu horde, whose name appears in Mount Hord, close to Mount Sin, and also in Horus or Horukan, right? Exactly who they were and whence they came is also shown by geodesy. And isosceles' spherical triangle with its apogees at Ararat, 40 degrees north, 44 degrees east, and Peking, 40 degrees north, 116 degrees east, a base of 72 degrees and an altitude of 40 degrests, resting its apex and Sivra Sembla, 80 degrees north, 100 degrees east, while its median passes through the abyss of learning at 40 degrees north and 100 degrees east. A similar triangle with its apogees at the ruins of Mogir on the delta of the Euphrates, 30 degrees north, 47 degrees east, and at the great triangular mound in the region of Chongqing. All right, you guys see the degrees, right? A base of 60 degrees and altitude of 50 degrees rests in apex and Safe Rano Sambla, while its median passes through the trinity of Kara Korum. And Indra Frastra, another triangle with its apogees at Mount Sinai and Mount Everest, a base at 54 degrees and an altitude of 52 degrees rest in apex and Iosimfa Sembla, while its meridian passes through Old Merv the Karakorum and Herat in Afghanistan, showing whence Narasingha brought the Sinitic cult of the Sino-Siberian continent and Mount Sin, a spherical triangle with its apogees at the Sphinx, and Lhasa, a base of 60 degrees and an altitude of 50 degrees also rests in apex and Iosimfa Sembla, while the median passes through the Old Merv and Herat, right? So they're showing the meridian lines and how they connect to different ancient sites and parts of the world, right? Why did the people build on these same places? They knew about the energies, probably, right? So that's what they're kind of going over right now. So there's still another triangle with its apogees at Almasora and Mount Ararat, a base of 44 degrees and an altitude of 40 degrees rests in apex and Spitsbergen, while its median passes through Sweden, Avo in Finland, Osel Island in the Baltic, Courland and Kovno in White Russia, the environs of Warsaw in Poland, Kosovo in the Balkans, the area of Olympus in the Tasa Saleh, Miluna Pass close to the peak of Parnassus, the Gulf of Corinth near Patras, Achaia, Arcadia, Messina, Cyrenaica, Bechuanaland, Griqualand, and close to the Cape of Good Hope. But a triangle with its apex at 80 degrees north near Spitsbergen, with an altitude of 40 degrees, would rest its apogees at Mount Olympus, in Moesia and Mount Atlas, in Poseidonis, while its median would pass through London and Almasora. Then comes the hook up with America. Then it comes to hook up with America, thus a triangle with a base of 70 degrees and one apogee at the headwaters of the Tagus, near Madrid and Toledo, and on altitude 40 degrees with its apex in Peary Land, would drop its meridian through Mount Atlas and rest its western apogee at the sacred elm of Chacamax, where Philadelphia arose. Chacamax or Philadelphia. Huh. So we see that whatever modern archaeologists, philologists, and historians may believe, we find on the graph of Gia the mathematical proof that the sites of the Semblance, Spitsbergen, the Abyss of Learning, Pekin, Mount Everest, Mount Turgat, Old Merv, Ararat, Herat, Ur, Mount Sinai, Giza, and the two northern Olympi, London, Toledo, Madrid, Mount Atlas, and Chacamax all relate to the present geodetic system in such a way as to form symbols of the sacred lotus. It's all connected to the ancient world, you see. So that includes America, okay? So today there is not the slightest room to doubt that long ago Janos had been brought to the seven hills of Latinum by Ru from the Arctic realm where his name is preserved in John, Mayan land, that the festival of Christmas traces back to the Italic Saturnalia. Also, Kris Kringle originated in the Norse festival of peace and goodwill, during which the virtues of Baldur and essentially white God were exalted and his return promised. So we find not only the name of Spitzberg preserved all over Europe, as in the English Spithead, but the name of Janus preserved in the Janiculum, one of the seven hills of Rome, and in the realm of Janina in Thessaly, just as the Aryans conveyed their cult from Spitsbergen, whose name appears all over Europe. They're called from Sivranoia, Sembla, to the Abyss of Learning. From Spitsbergen, whose name appears all over Europe, they conveyed it to the Olympi, in which they saw a natural symbol of the sacred lotus. So here's some more locational geographical places, right? So just as we find the region of Skyros, heaven, the circle of the serpent, and Euboea, we find the islands of Skye, Iona, and Staffa, on which Fingal's cave is located, off the west coast of Scotland. Also, just as we find the island of Colonsay near Iona, we find Colon Us and Attica, Admahim Christos I, When the Greek took over the oracle of Python at the Macedonian Olympus, they also took over the antediluvian mystery of the Kabita, which became the Greek mystery of the Kabiti or Caribbees, particularly near to seamen, seafaring people like the Caribs, that was enshrined at Colonai and in the labyrinth of Lemnos, Samos, and Knossos in Crete, and also at Rhodes. While enough has been shown to revolutionize the materialistic ideas of modern scholars who persist in trying to bring the antediluvian civilizations within the cycle commencing with the cataclysm of 10,000 BC, the verification of Josephus should heighten their respect for one whose testimony regarding America will be dealt with later. Now we must consider what became of the three brotherhoods after the two pillars had been reared by them. According to Josephus, after vainly trying to reform the sinners of Syriad, fearing for his life, Noah with his wife, sons, and their consorts left that land. Where they went to was shown by Berosus Nicholas of Damascus, a contemporary of Caesar Augustus and Josephus. Inevitably, they found a refuge amid the peaks of the Pamir Lumen above Armenia, south of the 10 symbolic towers of Circassia. Here at Mount Baris, where the Aryan ball had been enthroned just west of the present Aral 1C on the meridian of Mount Elbrus, the Karadag and Tauchina, the Shemites established themselves at the exact latitude of Akitna in Japan, the abyss of learning. In the Gobi, Mount Turgat, in the Pamir, the Moesian and the Macedonian Limpi, and Mount Atlas. In Poseidonis, and to this realm gave the name Ararat. The Hamites selected the hills of Palestine, while the company of Japhet claimed the Taurus range. At the same time, the Aryan Greeks, represented by Deucalion, god Christos Atma, the lion of the earth, with his wife Pyrrha, who represented the red pre-Asian peoples of Greece, established themselves at Parnassus. All right, so we dodged the hijack with their whole splitting up of the people, who they're saying are Hamites and Japhet. This is according to the author's view of race, right? On the meridian of Olympus and at the exact latitude of Manisa, near Smyrna, Cassadia, and the Taurus Mountains, Ionia, having been provided with a box in which to save themselves from the flood, they were told not to look backward, but to cast the bones of their ancestors into the sea. Thus, by adopting the Aryan arc embodied in the cube, they rid themselves of the old female cult of the black magicians, which the noble Hellenes alone had abjured. So were the antediluvians to be uplifted to the higher moral conceptions that would save them in the spiritual sense, instead of being converted by the impending deluge into human beasts who would destroy each other with tooth and claw, reposing their faith in the divine wisdom of a spiritual father. Upon the earthly cross they would find salvation for their souls. You must believe the children of Baldur were taught the earthly cross, huh? The Son of Light will return. All right, we dodged the hijack a little bit. He got his sources, see where his sources are coming from, right? You see the sources he's quoting all different people's, philosophies and ancient writings, and people look from the 1900s, okay? So some of the stuff is his ad stuff, right? Discernment, that's why we pull out the babies, we dodge the hijacks. For if man does not crave the beauty of life associated with the Son of God, how can there be a better world than that of the human reptiles who had smitten the Son of Radiance? See, he's got his Christian views, right? Notwithstanding the noble Hellenes, who, guided by Athene and dreaming of the resurrection of Baldur, struggled on against the Atlantean invaders of Libya. Already the latter had occupied Libya as far east of the Tyrrhenia and Egypt, right? The Atlanteans, invaders, huh? Americans taking over the whole spot. In the realm of the ancient Lusitanians, which had become the port of Gades when the strife was terminated by the cataclysmic event that shattered the once proud realm of Atlas. At once the might of the degraded invaders was broken. Then came the deluge, described in Genesis beginning in 850,000 BC, according to, I don't know how they get in these numbers right here. Concurrently with the sudden fall of temperature, ushering in the Great Ice Age. This, in truth, was the reason why the invading Machimu did not deem the realm of the Hellenes worth having, and after invading hell withdrew. The Nazis should have seen in the huge mandible of the Heidelberg man the jawbone of the Assinine race that undertook to conquer the world. All right. So look, the 52 a footnote right here about the 850,000 BC. It says they got that from The Great Ice Age by Geikie, 1874, and then from Climate and Time Crow from 1875. So you see the sources, and then the Biblical Deluge, right? So, you know, he got his sources, but you got to go to the sources too, get your own discernment, all right? And, that's the end of this chapter. It was pretty interesting, what he's trying to say, break it down, the deep meanings behind it, and the connections and the geography and the zodiacal maps of the places of the earth where they're built and all that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the reading and that part. And to people who like to go deep like that, hope you like this chapter. All right, pretty interesting. Still a little, right? It's all connected to the Americas as well, the old world, all this. And we know from previous researches when you're talking about a lot of these names, they're talking about here, these deities and all that, that they were talking about real people in the Americas or geographies, again, in the Americas. So again, this book was America, the background of Columbus, being a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus, by Jedon C. Wise. All right. And that's it for today, guys. I appreciate you reading this chapter with me together, see what we can pull out of it, right? We're just trying to progress along the book, make sure we don't miss something, right? We review it for educational purposes and to pull out the babies, right? We dodge the hijacks. I appreciate you guys sticking around all the way to the end, hearing me read. Hope you enjoyed it. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawaii.